Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Mango, and I'm the Business Development Director here at Omega Performance. It's currently 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're on schedule for our webinar series, the third of our webinar series, the Credit Fundamentals webinar series. This one is Putting Credit Fundamentals into Action. So welcome, everyone. I appreciate everyone's time, taking some time this afternoon out of everyone's busy schedule. As I mentioned, my name is Michael Mango, and I'll be with you this afternoon. And we're lucky and grateful to have Sharon Martinez from People's United Bank on the call as well. And I'll briefly pass it over to Sharon, and she can introduce herself, and then we'll get started with the rest of the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. I am a banking professional with over 25 years at People's United Bank, experience in many different capacities, operations, retail, origination, recruiting, and now my favorite role, the one that I'm most passionate about, focusing on strategic workforce initiatives in commercial banking. I also lead the development and implementation of programs that help to build a strong credit culture by improving the performance of our people. So thank you, Michael.
Great, and thanks again, Sharon, for taking time in your schedule to join us. So why don't we get started here, and just to kind of set everyone's expectation, Sharon and I will probably go through about maybe a half hour or so of chatting and the presentation everyone sees in front of them. And then we'll leave some time at the end for question and answer. So overall, we're really going to focus on how to activate, and that's important today because this is the third of our webinar series, and it's going to be to activate really a stronger credit culture overall in the organization. And as we've discussed in previous sessions, really people are critical linchpin overall in setting that credit culture. So overall, we'll explore some practical and some concrete actions to develop and motivate your people. You'll hear how successful organizations such as People's United use a base of credit fundamentals to build their business and also to manage risk. We'll talk about some strategies that are critical in building, and not only building, but sustaining a strong credit culture. We'll go over some management actions that positively influence the daily activity and also the behavior of your employees. And overall, you'll learn about some practical and effective practices that result in fully engaged and passionate employees. So with that said, credit culture. It's something that we talked about when we were lucky enough to have Tom early on from Citizens Bank in our first webinar. We reinforced it in our second webinar with one of our instructors, Laura Beaver. And it's really important, and Tom echoed this, and Sharon, when we were getting ready for this webinar, we discussed it really in great depth of how leadership plays such a critical role in defining and shaping an organization's credit culture. It really starts at the top, and when you have that leadership that is visibly committed and passionate about credit culture, it resonates down as long as it's constantly communicated throughout the employee base. Technology aids in assisting that strategy. So I guess a question for you, Sharon. Can you comment on the role of leadership and really how important it was to you and the organization at People's United Bank?
Absolutely. It's important. We definitely do get the support from the top down, and that's visible to everyone in the organization. So there's no doubt that the credit skill development and risk management are top priorities for our senior management. Our leadership completely supports our people development initiatives, and it builds the bench strength. It impacts the results. It makes us more efficient in attaining the results that we're looking for. Whenever we kick off a new initiative, everyone buys into it and understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that is key to making it all successful in the end.
So really kind of a team effort. And we've seen how organizational structure can impact credit culture by really establishing and maintaining clear roles, responsibilities, and authorities. So can you give us an example of how the organizational structure within People's United really has supported your efforts, especially in your role at the bank?
Sure. One example is how we share oversight of the foundational credit training program for the commercial bank. There's not just one decision maker who identifies the initiatives and selects the vendors. Instead, we actually have a governance committee that meets monthly to discuss progress, the needs, and the opportunities. We are all concerned about the engagement of our employees and their experience within the program. And this collaboration results in a shared sense of responsibility for credit excellence and also permeates into the activities on the line outside of the training.
So to define that again, so leadership begins at the top, clear and concise roles and responsibilities, which kind of really sets up for the next step in the equation here, which is really the credit fundamentals in establishing and reiterating that strong credit culture. So as I mentioned before during our second webinar with our instructor, Laura Beaver, we talked about the decision strategy and how it really is how it's a consistent approach to credit analysis and decision-making process to really define and provide a strong credit foundation. So I guess a question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about how People's United uses really that fundamental and consistent credit analysis practice in not only the decision-making, but also the execution of your credit culture overall?
Sure. Actually, the credit culture is built on applying proven approaches to analysis and the decision-making. It's definitely the foundation. And we partner with Omega to provide that foundational credit training through the decision strategy, which allows us to help get to quicker decisions and a better success for our employees that go through it. The result is that we're much more effective at getting the message out and setting the employees up for success because we're using a common language about credit analysis and we're working to make it quicker in the decision process, which makes us in turn much more competitive. Our loan policies and other risk management practices help us in our loan approval process, reporting protocols, monitoring our standards. They're all aligned with the foundation built around the consistent core, and that's critical to our success.
Okay, so that adds to kind of a recap of leadership during our first webinar, setting the consistent decision strategy and credit framework in our second, and now really where we are right now. And let's really turn our focus and putting it all into action, really some actionable items here for the people within the organization who are really responsible to make it happen every day. So it starts with developing skills and the shared values. Can you describe a little bit, Sharon, on how People's United really put this plan into action, an actionable item here?
It wasn't an easy feat, Michael, I'll tell you that. But credit fundamentals are a critical core of the overall training. This includes our credit analysts, our commercial banking trainees, our junior portfolio managers, and our junior relationship managers. It's not limited to one target audience, and that's important to emphasize here. Credit training is offered and provided to a wide population within the bank, including people who may not directly be in lending roles. And this reinforces buy-in from other parts of the bank and also provides wider opportunity for all. This is what creates shared values in our credit and also provides opportunities for careers in commercial. This approach has definitely been successful, and we have added more learning opportunities by our recently expanded contract in partnership with Omega. And we're excited about it because people are definitely interested in taking advantage of the opportunity.
So that's interesting that the approach is really from a broader perspective and really embracing that fundamental credit culture within the organization. So I guess the next step in the process would really be focused on kind of the development. So maybe we can take a couple minutes and discuss that. So ultimately, we've seen how critical it is to develop a credit culture, that strong skills are developed and maintained among all people across the enterprise. So as a follow-up question on the development side, can you share with us some of the actions that People's United has taken to ensure that the investment in skill development is really providing an ongoing return for the bank and also for the employees?
Absolutely. Actually, there are several critical factors. We don't view training as an event. We look at it as a total development journey, strategically. We use credit fundamentals as a foundation, and each individual's experience or journey is built on that. We have a long-term credit development plan that is based on working with the individual's skills and needs. We know it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, so we have to perform an assessment of their skills to identify what that skill set is and what their particular needs are. Fundamental credit and accounting skills definitely are an essential platform, but we go way beyond that to include business writing, systems knowledge, presentation skills, amongst other things. Each individual's experience or journey is unique, and we monitor their progress and provide guidance along the way, and we do this via the way of the governance committee. The time that is spent in training depends on a number of different factors because everyone learns differently. It's how quickly they can master their skills, how much work they're exposed to, what resources they have, including coaching. Coaching is a critical part of our process. The learning journey may also include many opportunities for structured training and on-the-job experience. It also includes the help of a coach who may be assigned to provide feedback on the actual work that's related to the training. And this is an ongoing process. And the role of the coach, as I mentioned earlier, is critical in our strategy. And a good coach can make a difference in whether the training investment pays off or not.
So coaching, teamwork, and I guess in your response right there, one thing that kind of resonated me with it, which I think it's really overlooked a lot of ways, you talked about the credit and the accounting piece, very defined, foundational by nature. But you also mentioned business writing. So, you know, the act and the art of writing a consensus, you know, concise credit memo, or to be quite candid with, even a structured email per se, in this day and age of social media and abbreviated communication and acronyms, et cetera, you know, business writing has really been lost in terms of a skill set. So it's good to hear that's important to the organization, which ultimately is setting not only the credit culture within the bank as well.
Absolutely.
So I guess if we get even down to more of kind of a granular level here, let's talk about kind of the daily activities and behavior. You know, really concreting these fundamental credit fundamentals into really an action item that comes down to what people do on a daily basis. So ideally, you want to see employees who take ownership of these values and practices that are expected within the culture and laid out by leadership. Policies and procedures should govern a working environment really where risk management is shared. So not one area owns it, so it doesn't fall just within credit or even risk as a larger. It is across the bank and the enterprise. So I guess a concise question for you, Sharon, is really what on-the-job activities or behaviors do you look for to try and reinforce you know, these certain factors amongst people, and how do you ultimately measure that? How do you measure the success and performance of that?
Well, you know, it's definitely an art and not a science. We do expect people on the job to demonstrate the skills and practices that they need and learn throughout their development journey, including the foundation of the credit fundamentals. We want them to walk the walk and not just the talk, and they can only do this if they embrace the system and the credit philosophy. People must always comply with stated policies, especially when it comes to regulatory compliance. We all know that's real in the banking world, but we don't want them to be robots. They have to show that they can think and act independently. And we look for successful employees' performance on several dimensions. How have they enhanced their overall skills? Have they adapted to our culture? Have they demonstrated the ability to work independently? Are they inquisitive? Are they able to ask insightful questions? And can they recognize and articulate strengths and weaknesses in different types of lending situations? That is how we measure success.
So in terms of measuring success, you know, that's ultimately the goal here, and it substantiates the significant time and financial investment to the bank. So one of the questions that I receive when I'm talking with our clients is really after or in the midst of a rollout of an initiative like this is how do you create that engagement with the employee, and almost as important, how do you sustain it? So if you're 12 months, 24 months into a plan, how do you keep the momentum going, for lack of a better way of looking at it? So I guess the question for you is, how do you ensure that the people are engaged, they're committed? You mentioned how much collaboration and working together to really improve the credit culture is. How do you ensure that? How do you make sure that the investment is paying off, not only from a time and an investment standpoint, but ultimately from leadership's expectations?
Well, sure. And, it took us a while to get here, and this is dating back to 2007. Our strategy has been to develop and retain talent internally. And prior to 2007, we found that as the organization grew, we had to acquire experienced lenders from other banks. And this was not a sustainable strategy. So we then developed our training program to build our own bench strength. This has enabled us to be very successful because what happened is we ended up building an engagement model where our homegrown talent is engaged and committed through their learning experience. And they realize the investment that the bank is making in their development and in their career, and we're providing that opportunity to build a career in commercial. This has absolutely helped us from an efficiency standpoint. It's helped in the bottom line in reducing turnover, and other positive outcomes are the reputation of our program and how it attracts new talent. Very, very popular outside the organization, and it shines some light. They want people to be part of our organization because it provides that commitment to the development of our employees. So now, instead of losing the talent to other organizations, we're promoting our own talent within the organization. And this has resulted in people throughout our bank at all levels and functions, perceiving that credit training is a path to greater opportunities within the bank, and people are eager to get into that credit training. We have also made sure that we recognize and reward people for their efficient and effective risk management practices, and we want to be sure that people know they're doing a good job. Now, I mentioned coaching earlier, but I can't emphasize it enough here. We provide coaching training so that we can improve the effectiveness of our coaches because they're so critical to reinforcing and sustaining our credit culture where it counts on the job.
So I guess one of the things the comments that you made that really resonates with me is that coaching aspect and really how important that is as a piece, an important piece of the equation here, because I mentioned before about the questions I get about sustainability and setting realistic expectations to keep this engagement going. You embarked on this process going on almost 10 years ago now, and you really done it. I mean, if you look at it from a kind of a loan generation standpoint, you've done it organically. You've built it within as opposed to having to go outside to really harness some of the talent in the market. And the nice thing about that is you have the constraints of building that credit culture across the organization from within. So really a process that is not easy. It takes a while to do so, but putting the right people in place, starting with leadership down, is so critical to that piece, and the coaching just really reinforces it.
Absolutely. And one of the other things, Michael, just to add to everything that you said, we realize that nothing is fully perfect, and we have a continuous improvement built into our processes, so we're always looking to enhance the experience, enhance the learning items, enhance the manager, coach, employee relationship. So all of that is built into our practices.
So Sharon, if I could do this, I want to go back to one point you mentioned before, which I think is really important, and it really came down to the idea of allowing folks within different areas or different lines of business within the bank to have access to the training. So not a defined course for a defined role. Can you speak a little bit more about that, and really if that's something that you expected to have such a groundswell of support and interest in? And really tell me a little bit more about that process, if you don't mind.
No, sure, I definitely do not mind. We've always had an interest from folks outside of the commercial division here at People's United exploring career opportunities within commercial, and we really didn't have an avenue to provide any guidance outside of transitioning into commercial and learning on the job. with our expanded learning opportunities through our partnership with Omega, we have been able to allow employees throughout the organization at all levels that want to get into credit training, we give them the opportunity to do it. It's a commitment, it is seen as a real opportunity, and they make the investment in their learning journey by committing to that training. It has been very well received. I did expect that, but what I didn't expect is the volume. And so I am beyond happy with the results. I'm beyond happy with the opportunity to be able to provide this for our employees across the organization. This has proven to be an excellent engagement tool.
That's great. I mean, if you look, getting back to one of the points we talked about before about really measuring success, you know, having that engagement and having that interest from the ground up is so critical with the rollout, not only initially but also the sustainment piece. So let me just take a step back here. It's 1:20 right now. Why don't I do this, Sharon? And if it's okay with you, I'm gonna open up the chat line here. There's some questions, and if you just give me a moment, let me try to organize these real quick. There's quite a few coming through, so in the next 10 minutes that we kind of have allocated, let me go through these questions. We'll talk about them. I know we didn't necessarily prepare for all the questions coming through, so I'll do my best to try to segment them and make them as concise as possible. But I guess here's a question. Let's start with this one because it happened to come up first. Organizational challenges, so especially across the different lines of business. What were some of the challenges that you had in not only really the preparation aspect of a rollout initiative like this, but also during the process? Can you talk about some of those organizational challenges, whether it's by structure or design?
Sure. It was, I would say the major challenge initially was determining the right decision makers. So this is where the governance committee was given birth to, I should say, because it was hard to find the right individuals that needed to be involved in the decision-making process. So once we organized ourselves around having this committee that viewed in their sole purpose was for the credit training and ongoing development of the commercial employees, we had a path to follow. And that just led to additional progress.
Sure. You know, as I guess a follow-up question, we briefly talked about measuring success, and especially when you're dealing with, you know, credit folks involved here and credit by nature. Can you tell me a little bit about the quantitative approach versus kind of the qualitative approach of how you measured success? So I know that you were involved with some of the analytical reporting from a quantitative standpoint. You know, we talked about the organic growth of talent. Where did those merge? When did you kind of really realize, and when did it resonate that this is successful and something that can be sustained?
Absolutely. Well, from a number of different perspectives, as you mentioned, they're both the quantitative and the qualitative results that help us measure that success. So we have our standard reporting where we can, you know, identify the time from origination to close, the successful number of attempts from origination to close. Also, so that's some of the quantitative, but some of the qualitative, less rewrites of our credit underwriting and our credit write-ups and their memos. So before, when I mentioned the idea of a coach, the back and forth maybe was 5 times between the two, and now we can get to a write-up with maybe nothing. And so the time frame, the efficiency we gain through investing in the time and coaching and training of the individuals to get to that desired state. So that's some of the measurements of success, but there are plenty of others. We can see that folks have improved their presentation skills in credit committee. They focus on the relevant and concise information. So those, again, are qualitative measures.
So the kind of the elimination of the elevator pitch and getting down to a concise way of delivering the information, and it's interesting that example you used on credit and loan committee and how important that is to be concise and to the point.
Absolutely.
So here's a question, and it relates to kind of the investment and the return on the investment. And a question coming in kind of from the chat line here is, how are costs and how did you approach the costs that are allocated to training whether it's on an individual plan, we'll say per employee, what type of needs assessment had you done? And I guess a question that always comes up when from my position is whether this investment is really looked at as kind of a cost, i.e. an expense, or a long-term investment. And obviously, People's United has done it very successfully from an organic standpoint. So how did you approach really the financial impact associated with it?
You know, and that's an interesting question. In beginning this initiative, we weren't sure what we were getting into from a cost perspective, but we knew that there were going to be a lot of resources that perform our business results day to day that were going to be impacted by the investment in training. But what came, and this is basically from the top down, is the investment in time and development of our employees was the long-term investment and is going to be proven to be profitable in the end. So while we do get the cost impacts to the bottom line, it's just a short-term expense for a long-term benefit. And so that's the way we viewed it, and we have a huge commitment to that.
It's evident, and you know, you're 9 years into the process right now. It's really been successful overall. We have time probably for one more question here, and let me just briefly kind of recap it, and then I'll introduce it to you. So it kind of leads back. So the question that just came in kind of leads back to having more than one course available to your employees, and kind of, I'm not going to say regardless of the role, but there may be an interest in a separate line of business that via your LMS, the employees are allowed to get access to. And it kind of goes back to refresher training. So if you know you're 9 years into this process, if somebody has gone through the process X amount of years ago, do they still have the ability that they can go in and, you know, they had a discussion about cash flow and they want to go back and refresh their skills a bit? Has that come up, and really how have you approached that scenario?
So that's an excellent question, and it's really going to be dependent on what training they need a refresher in. Anything that's implemented internally, created internally, is refreshed every year for relevance and any changes incorporated into the training, but it's made available for folks to access anytime, and it has as many times as they like. But if you're talking about the Omega training, we make it available to all of our employees, and we recommend that they follow the appropriate steps to have access to the resources that will be made available ongoing. And they can always retake any training that they had taken in the past if they need a refresher. So we always make that available because we realize folks may want to cross over to different lines of business, and
sure,
they could be an expert in one, and they love the ability to explore before actually making the change, and that helps them in their decision process.
Going back to one of the points that you introduced was really about kind of the continuous engagement and how important that component is.
Absolutely.
So, okay, Sharon. So we're at 1:28 right now. Why don't we do this? I think we got through all the questions that had come through. Let's, before I get into recapping it here, I want to thank you for your time, your insight. I took down a number of notes here that are action items for me to go back on. I appreciate your time and your insight today. So, Sharon, thanks again.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And I want to thank everyone that took the time out of their schedule to dial in. Today's recording will be available soon once we get it packaged. So from a next step standpoint, if there's any questions that come up for myself, anything that Sharon and I discussed, feel free to contact us, our phone number, our website, our email address, etc. There's also a blog on our website that does a recap of not only this webinar, but our previous two webinars from the Credit Fundamentals webinar series. I want to thank everyone for their time today. It's 1:29, keeping everyone on schedule. I think we're all set. And with that said, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And thanks again for joining us today. Take care, everybody.